on to a different topic. We're going to talk to author Lee Harris. His book is The Next American Civil War, The Populist Revolt Against the Liberal Elite. This ought to be good. Lee, welcome to the Young Turks.
Hello?
Hey, yes, you're on, Lee.
Okay, I'm sorry, I wasn't sure.
That's all right. All right, so Lee, tell me about about the next American Civil War. When's it happening? I got to go grab a musket.
Yeah, that's not exactly what I think the proper response should be at this point.
Oh, okay, good.
By the next Civil War, I mean a situation in which the United States is so polarized, so culturally alienated, that people are not able to even understand what the other side is trying to say. The title of the book came about from talking to people who really felt after the election of Obama that we were headed towards a civil war, who believed that we were headed towards a revolution. Like a lot of people, I found that kind of talk to be very, very strange. But the problem is when you have enough people thinking that kind of thing, then it really does become a danger. And what I think is important is for people who are perhaps removed from people like that to take more seriously the split that we're going through. It's not saying that I'm not saying at all that we should agree with them or anything like that, but I'm saying we need to take very seriously the level of frustration and anger that is present. I just heard you express a little bit of your own about Obama, and you're someone who supported him. There are a lot of people who didn't support him who feel anger and frustration, and they feel like that the government now is in the hands of people who have no interest in them, who are out to basically take advantage of them and exploit them. The question is, how on earth do we get back to a situation in which we have a modicum of trust between the different factions and towards our government?
Well, Lee, I know you talk about the Tea Party guys, and you're talking about these people who are disaffected. I have a theory on that I want to run by you. I think that those guys break into two different camps. So one, the people who are disillusioned, and they hate that the bailout money happened, for example, and they feel like their money's being taken and given to special interests.
Right.
I have tremendous sympathy for them. I think they're largely right. Okay. Now, I think they've been misdirected. We'll get into that in a second. But I actually think there's also a second camp of people that the conservatives won't recognize. And those are the people that are generally angry that they've lost power in this country. I don't want to call them racist. I think that's way too broad. But hey, you know what? They're the guy who wanted to give their son the same job they had, and now they got to worry about that Hispanic guy or that black guy or the Asian woman or whatever coming in and trying to get that same job, and they don't like it. And they liked it when they had it when they were in power, and all of a sudden they have to share that power, and that makes them really uncomfortable. And
yes, well, it does. But I'm not at all disagreeing with your analysis, but what I would ask you to do is step back and let's look at the history of other societies. How many people immigrants to Japan allow into its country to take jobs or to live there or to teach at universities? None. I mean, you're dealing with, if on a comparative scale, it is not unusual at all for a society which has been basically founded by white Protestants and created by white Protestants to feel like, well, this is ours, and other people are trying to take it away. Now, you might not agree with that sentiment, but it's certainly to deny it's a human sentiment and a very common sentiment among nations is I think rather absurd. And this is the kind of thing I think it's dangerous to ask Americans in this kind of position to rise above the general level of humanity, which is very insistent on keeping their culture to themselves and in their own hands.
Well, Lee, there's an important distinction there because, as you just heard, I don't deny it. I talk about it all the time. The question is, what are you going to do about it? So, I mean, if your answer is, well, okay, that's a natural and healthy reaction, then I disagree. If you say that's a natural reaction, but one we should look to alleviate.
A natural reaction is not necessarily a healthy reaction.
Right. So I'm saying, do you recognize that we should look to get beyond that?
I think it's very important for there to be a sense of collective grievance across these lines, across racial lines and cultural lines like that. Because I think my own position, and this is different certainly from the position of the Tea Party. I'm not endorsing them. I'm simply saying that it is good to have people who do not like to be bossed around, who do not like other people trying to manage their lives or telling them what to do. And there's a lot of that going around right now. And what I would like to see is for them to feel a sense of linkage with other groups who are similarly going through that, being treated that way. I mean, what I'm afraid of, to tell you the truth, is a society in which you have a group of people who basically come from major universities, who go to work with huge for international firms, and who then go back to big government. And it's like a shell game. It's like who is really the controlling here. And in fact, it's kind of like these three groups: the major big universities, big government, and big corporations are putting more and more power into their hands, more and more ability to manipulate and indoctrinate people's ideas into accepting this as a natural order.
We're talking to Lee Harris. He's the author of The Next American Civil War, The Populist Revolt Against the Liberal Elite. Now,
let me say, I have a piece coming out in Policy Review this next month, in which, you called me a conservative, in which I take an argument from Antonio Gramsci, the Italian communist. And I say, essentially, what Gramsci is arguing in his theories that he developed in the 1920s is that you have a center of power, and the center of power will be the people who have wealth and power, and they will use this power and this wealth to keep themselves in their nice position and to pass it on to their children. Outside of the center of this power are the outsiders, the alienated outsiders, and very often the alienated outsiders make war on each other. They don't see their real common enemy as that center of power, and that's what I think. This is what I would like to see. I would like to see the Tea Party wake up and say, well, my heavens, we are not the only ones who are being treated this way.
Lee, there's so much that you say that I agree with, and, and I read some of your material, and I thought, wow, this is a really smart and interesting argument that you're making. So let me tell you what the core of my problem, I guess, with the title of your book is. You say The Next American Civil War, The Populist Revolt Against the Liberal Elite. Now, that to me turns things on its head, because now when you say, hey, people are disillusioned and that these people in power are trying to keep their power and that they're taking the middle class money, etc., all of that is true. The problem is the people doing it aren't the liberals. They're the people that are the heart of the establishment, Wall Street and Washington. And to call them liberals is, I think, entirely wrong. That if you can call them anything politically, you would certainly call them conservative.
Well, you have a very good point, and the titles and subtitles are always completely left up to the author. And in terms of marketing, I was driven crazy about what the title of this book. I would love to go back to the 18th century and title books like A Discourse on Human Liberty and things like that. But, this is, in essence, I agree with you. What we're talking about here is not simply the liberal elite, although the elites tend to be liberal in one sense of the word, which is they basically don't have much respect for conservative traditions. That is, they tend to be the enemy of tradition. They tend to be the enemy of traditions of independence, of people thinking for themselves, because they would prefer a population that has basically been told that it's right and necessary and common sense.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all. I think the conservative tradition is one of authoritarianism. Not completely, but I'm just saying they're on that side of the political spectrum where you listen to people in authority. And the liberal tradition is of our founding fathers, where they said, no, we're going to do a revolution here because we don't believe in that authority and we believe people should be free and independent.
Yes, but there you have an interesting problem, because in America, it was, I think, Louis Hartz who said, in America, to be a conservative means to be a liberal because you're conserving liberalism. Okay, to me, conserving liberalism requires us conserving certain traditions, and those traditions are precisely the kind of traditions you're talking about. The tradition of not putting up with people trying to manipulate your life or boss you around or take advantage of you. The tradition of looking at people who have too much power. It's like the wars against the banks that were waged by the populist movements in the 19th century. The average person said, hey, these people running these banks are going to make deals with themselves. They're going to enrich themselves. They're going to take money and use it for their own devices. They sounded kind of silly a generation ago, but now with the financial meltdown and Goldman Sachs, it's beginning to sound like these people had a point. So yeah, I don't want to get into semantics of labels because there are whole slews of labels I would just love to do away with at this point because I think they've become obstacles to clarity of thought.
All right, so let's
find that when I write, it becomes extremely difficult sometimes to circumvent these problems because. Frankly, I'm a Hegelian. I believe that opposites go into each other. That conservatism in the United States really is a form of liberalism, and liberalism is really a form of conservatism.
All right. So let's avoid the words for now. Let's go get on to actions because I think, of course, actions are much more important. So what I'm worried about is that this initial massive disillusion people that we discussed, which has taken at least partly the form of the Tea Party protests in America, have been entirely misdirected from their original campaign of, hey, I want my independence, don't tread on me, and I don't want my money going to bailouts, into supporting the largest corporations in America, the special interests, saying, hey, you know what, government better not regulate healthcare at all because I need the drug companies to make more money, I need the insurance companies to make more money, and to be able to deny me insurance if they want to. And yet, first of all, I think that's totally wrong, and then second of all, where are the Wall Street protests? Non-existent. So can you see how they've taken this and through FreedomWorks, Americans for Prosperity, and other such think tanks, these corporate interests have brilliantly misdirected them to exactly what they thought they were fighting against.
Well, I think you're making a very good argument here, and I think I have problems with think tanks too. I have problems with conservative think tanks, and I'm not a member of any think tank. You're making a very good point, and I don't know how to address this issue in terms of how do you get people to start saying this. But there's an old tradition that goes back to Louis Brandeis, who wrote a book called I think it was called The Curse of Bigness. And at one point in time, progressivism meant taking up, for ordinary people, protecting them against the rapacity of huge corporations. Protecting them against, the abuse of big government. But this kind of progressivism is no longer, I don't see it any longer because there's this obstacle of this kind of cultural contempt for the ordinary people. I think a good way of beginning with this is to look at the Tea Party people because there are people in the conservative movement like David Brooks who are making scandalously snobbish remarks about the Tea Party people. I think a very good way of dealing with a person and entering into dialogue is by treating them with respect. You don't have to agree with their arguments, but to not to dismiss them as morons is a helpful way of approaching people. I mean, I've dealt all my life with people who have very different ideas than myself, and I find that by saying, yes, listen, I understand what you're talking about is a great opening, and it means I can, from that point on, I can maybe nudge them in the right direction. But what I see happening on so many people who call themselves liberals is that all they're doing is like hitting these people over the head and trying to ridicule them, and I find that very objectionable. But I agree with you. I think for example, like in the healthcare thing, I looked at the healthcare thing and I saw Obama make what I thought were rather nice, sweet deals with these big insurance companies. Instead of using the power of the state to say, listen, we want a better deal from you guys, which we could do. I mean, this is what, if the American government were a business, we would say, hey guys, you have to give us, lower insurance rates, lower drug rates, and things like that. And I see that, when the average person looks at Obama and sees him making these rather nice deals as far as the companies goes, what are they supposed to think?
Yeah, Lee, finally, I got to wrap up by saying this. Look, that's why I've reached out to the Tea Party people before, and then progressives get mad at me, how could you, etc., because I think that there is a core that they're right about, but at the same time, I can't help but call them suckers, because they got suckered into working against their own interests. That's why I'm reaching out to them, saying, listen, stop it. Your enemy isn't the government that's doing the regulation. Your enemy is the government that gives the bailout, that protects the bankers.
I think that approach, an absolute essential precondition of that approach working, however, is to have respect for their cultural values. And I think this is what's lacking, is that these people oftentimes they're profoundly religious, They have traditional views on marriage. They have all sorts of things like that. And when
well, we're not going to agree on that stuff. We're not going to agree on that stuff. But all I'm saying is, hey, listen, just wake up and know that you're being misdirected by these groups that bring you the bus. If somebody's bringing you a bus, if they brought 40 buses, somebody paid for that. Think about who paid for it and why did they pay for it, right? We don't have to agree on abortion. We don't have to agree on gay rights, right? But what we do have to realize is, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, whether it's Geithner or Paulson, they robbed us. And you got to wake up to that quickly, otherwise we're not going to be able to fight the real guys, the real bad guys who are the establishment power centers. So I hope they can come to that
Well, I agree,
conclusion.
but I think if there's any difference between us, and I'm not sure how much there is, it's a matter of technique of how to reach out. And I think, my approach may be it may go back to the Jesuits or something. It's that I believe in starting in working on those areas where we agree. And I think it's very easy. I've talked to a lot of these people, pretty far on the right, who have the same attitude towards the financial bailout, who have the same attitude towards these big banks. So they're not. And I think I would love to sit down with some of the Tea Party people and say, okay, like you, I think free enterprise is a wonderful system, but monopoly capitalism is not free enterprise.
Exactly.
If you want to get back to free enterprise, then you have to start, getting rid of these institutions which are quote unquote too big to fail.
Couldn't agree more. All right, very interesting conversation, no doubt about that. Lee Harris is the author of The Next American Civil War, The Populist Revolt Against the Liberal Elite, which he admits is a little mistitled. Okay. Lee, thanks for joining us on The Young Turks.